Yeah, okay. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here and tell you about this new IMI proposal to tackle antibacterial resistance. I head up the antibiotic discovery group at GSK, but today I'm talking on behalf of all the companies that have put this proposal together as listed there. So I just want to build on some of the comments that Michelle made about why we thought it was so important to spend the time in creating this proposal. So I'm just going to give you a perspective from the industry about what we think that the major challenges are. We see there are three clear challenges to this therapeutic area. There are some very unique scientific challenges, and I'm going to touch on one of those around topic 2, as you'll see in a moment. There's actually a very challenging regulatory environment, but in actual fact, there are some good conversations now going on at the FDA and EMEA, and I think that could change the environment, so I think the time is right for a concerted effort for making new antibacterials. And antibacterials have a lower return on investment relative to many other types of medicines. And that's actually for very appropriate reasons, because when we create a new antibiotic, we don't want it being used indiscriminately across a very broad range of patients, most of which perhaps don't need it. So in actual fact, the target patient population that we want our new drugs to be used on could be relatively quite small. Yet the antibacterial is very expensive to develop, but the patient population can be quite small. Now, the combination of all those three things has led to the scenario in the graph there. Over the last 10 years, the number of medium, large pharmaceutical companies that have been working in this area has decreased dramatically. The effect of that, you can see, is that the number of new antibacterials that are being approved has reduced to a pretty pitiful level, as shown on the graph. And then in the background, you can see resistance is increasing. The need for new antibiotics to treat patients with multi-resistant infections is increasing as well. So this conjures up this perfect storm scenario. And quite frankly, if we do nothing, I don't think any of us can see anything that's going to turn that picture around. So our conclusion is that the challenges of what we face here are too big for one entity to deal with. And that's why we really feel that collaboration is now essential to move forward and be successful. Now, the other big challenge of this area is antimicrobial resistance is quite unpredictable. Many of you may be aware of this resistance mechanism that was found on the other side of the world. It's actually found in environmental samples in other side of the world, yet it crops up causing life-threatening infections across hospitals in Europe and other places around the world. Now, we all know that type of thing can happen, but we don't know when it's going to happen, we don't know how it's going to happen, and we don't know where it's going to happen. And the other picture there, we're all very familiar with this scenario of a resistant clone being found in one country and then rapidly spreading across the world. And my own personal experience with this, as a young PhD student at the end of the 1980s, I was working on extended spectrum beta-lactamases. When I was doing that work, there were only about 6 clinical isolates that produced those enzymes in the whole world. Now, just about every single hospital around the world has a problem with extended spectrum beta-lactamases, which confer resistance to third-generation cephalosporins. So I think what we're trying to create here is a long-term strategy to address not just the problems of today, but the problems and the unpredictable problems of the future. And we can't wait until these issues become a problem, because it can take us 10 years, and probably more than 10 years, to create an antibiotic to address some of these problems. So we need a very concerted effort now to create a very robust pipeline of new antibacterials. And so these are really the major reasons why we've spent so much time putting this proposal together. Now, some of the major themes that are really through the full project. The first one here is this is really to address the European strategy to combat antibacterial resistance, as came down from the European Parliament to really make some concrete action to address this problem. And for me personally, I think I've been part, and many others in the room have been part of discussions talking about creating public-private partnerships in this area. But in actual fact, this is the first real concrete example of a broad public-private partnership to address all aspects of antibacterial resistance. So I think it actually puts Europe in quite a leadership position with respect to this partnership. Now, the other two key components are key to everything that I'm going to be talking about. One is about sharing information. we have a lot of information that in the past, we always keep locked up in our security vaults and secrecy vaults in our big companies. This is now information that we're now going to share, and we think by sharing a lot of that information about our successes and our failures are going to be very helpful to increase the probability of success for this therapeutic area. And the last point is all of the projects are focused on delivering agents that will either be used for the treatment, the prevention, or the management of multi-resistant infections. And the priority pathogens are briefly listed there, but they're in more detail in the proposal. So how do we think this is going to affect the R&D process? So as I've said, sharing successes and failures. As an industry, we're very good at going to conferences and trying to convince everybody how good we are. We're not very good at going to conferences and telling people about the things that went wrong. So we've all worked on targets that we've ended up terminating because the validation didn't work out. We've all worked on new chemical series that have ended up as a safety or tolerability dead end, and there was no way forward and the program terminated. We've all put molecules into humans that never worked out, but we don't really share that information. So one aspect of this will be to share that type of information, and I think that will avoid two companies independently running into the same problem. So we think this will increase the overall efficiency of what goes on in antibacterial discovery. Another aspect that was touched on by Michelle is that our clinical trials tend to be very large, and we tend to recruit patients into those trials that are not really the appropriate patient we want to have in that trial. If we had, and this is one of the focus of the program, if we had better biomarkers, better diagnostics to pinpoint the exact patient that we want to enroll in that clinical trial, that could lead us to running much smaller, more efficient clinical trials, probably with more robust endpoints as well. So there's an opportunity to start testing very rapid point-of-care diagnostics in the clinical trial we're going to talk about. There's also another goal of the proposal is to create a clinical trial consortium for antibacterials. That will be the first of its kind. The hope is that this will create an expert and proficient group across Europe for running these types of clinical trials, which will be a resource to all sorts of groups that want to run antibacterial trials in the future. And the last point there is really touching on topic 2, really to provide more rational scientific approach to increase our chances of success in designing new agents for tackling multi-resistant gram-negatives. So I'll touch on that towards the end of the slides. So the broad architecture of the project is listed here. Topic 3 I'm not going to talk about, though we're having discussions about additional calls that we're going to add to this proposal. The main focus of those calls is probably going to be around the gram-negative area, discovery programs, and maybe clinical compounds as well. I'm not going to say any more about that because it's really just under discussion at this stage. So topic 1, very broadly, this is where we're going to be running the clinical trials and also creating an environment that will enable and facilitate the clinical trial consortium. And then topic 2, there's 2 key components to that. One will be the database for storing all the knowledge around the successes and failures. I'm not going to say too much about that because it's really quite straightforward. The second component, and I will be spending more time on this, is trying to understand new ways so we can design molecules more rationally to penetrate gram-negative pathogens. So I'm going to a few slides on topic 1, and then I'll talk about topic 2. So the broad goals of topic 1 is really to provide clinical data on new antibacterials through running clinical trials, but also to improve the overall efficiency of antibiotic clinical trials, whether that be the use of biomarkers, diagnostics, more innovative phase 2 and phase 3 designs, or perhaps identify more clinical trial sites in regions of high resistance. It's very important for us when we run our clinical trials that we test our drugs against the most resistant organisms that are out there, because that's the best way of us proving that our new antibiotics are better than the current classes of antibiotics that are established. So you'll see that's a theme I keep coming back to. To pinpoint those regions and institutions of high resistance are important.